Before getting started, this video will be available ad-free in an audio podcast form on locals.com for monthly supporters, as well as my entire content library being up on Odyssey, which is a YouTube alternative where users can earn credits just by browsing and support their favorite creators even more. Links are down below. Okay, today I want to discuss timing, which may seem like a rather boring and innocuous topic, but trust me, it absolutely isn't. The crux of the issue revolves around the impending and already executed, at least by some publishers and development studios, price hike of video games from $60 to $70. Now, I've talked about this before. I consider this to be one of the greatest fundamental lies in all of modern gaming, the lie that they must increase in price, because most AAA titles, nearly all of them if we're being completely fair here, which are the primary market that would increase from $60 to $70 in the first place. Most indie games operate in the 5, 10, 20, 30, or 40 range. Most AAA titles are layered with microtransactions, season passes, battle passes, loot boxes, special editions, and whatever else they can think of to extract the highest possible sum of money from each and every player that they can. I have outlined dozens, possibly hundreds of examples over the years, and I won't turn this into a giant rehash of all the existing points that I've made time and time again, but the culture is easily summarized here. AAA gaming has remained static in terms of box price since, I believe, the 1990s, but secondary revenue has increased by an unknown exponent. Not a factor, not a standard multiplication, an exponent. The increase is incredible. Furthermore, since this issue revolved around timing, we need to expand upon contemporary events because the year 2020 has been one of the most hectic annual cycles in modern history, and the effects of that on gaming in particular have been rather profound. Coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, a novel viral pandemic swept across the world, and the effects of this have crept into every single corner of life. Industries were shuttered, statewide lockdowns in the US, nationwide lockdowns in Europe, and each region had its own tactic. Some countries tried to remain open, others locked down with an iron fist, but the effects of stagnating the global economy had, and continue to have, far-reaching ramifications. I'm not here to tell you what I believe was or was not the right call for combating the virus itself, lockdown or stay open. I've heard arguments for and against them both numerous times, but what I can say definitively, without any dispute whatsoever, is that the shutdowns throttled a once thriving worker economy and created record joblessness and unemployment. A couple examples of what is occurring right now on an even more global scale as well, not just the United States, are major cinema companies as well as Disney. Regal and Cineworld Theaters, at least I think that's how you pronounce it, as far as I know, the second largest chain of movie theaters across the US and the UK, with almost 800 locations, are shutting down indefinitely, and AMC Theaters, another top 5 brand in the cinema entertainment industry, does not believe it will be able to survive the pandemic. Disney has closed down a huge number of its locations and laid off almost 30,000 workers. And that's just a few of the larger companies affected by the ongoing lockdowns and the decrease to non-essential consumer spending. The effects of this are ongoing. The economic implications are constant. And the point here is to illustrate that certain areas of the global economy are quite literally falling apart and might never, ever recover or be the same again. However, not all industries are equal in this category. Certain companies, especially in the technology sector, have actually benefited from this pandemic, and high on that list is gaming. The video game industry over recent years has shifted from majority physical to majority digital. Never mind the fact that this has verifiably cut down on game production and distribution costs, increased publisher profit margins, and created an entirely separate and extremely valid reason why they do not need to raise prices at all, but that was true even before the coronavirus pandemic. Point is, gaming is not like movie theaters, it's not like theme parks, and it almost perfectly transitioned during the lead up to this global event into a distribution model that made it more accessible than ever before, to a population with more free time than ever, and more need to be entertained without leaving the house or interacting with others. Effectively, this was a perfect storm that has benefited gaming like no other singular event in history. All-time highs on Steam player count charts. Even tertiary systems like Twitch, a streaming platform still somewhat targeting a video game demographic, hit explosive new records during the lockdowns. And this is reflected across the entire industry. Video game publishers were and are earning more money than ever before. And yet, with more money than they have ever made in their entire corporate existence rolling in on a monthly basis, the push towards $70 instead of $60 sped up even faster. Keep all of this in mind. The video game industry is soaring on all-time highs while other industries fail, but that isn't the only issue. The important thing to remember is that the reason they are soaring to all-time highs is because of a simultaneous dampening effect on worker employment that has been spiraling out of control for many months. While gaming companies flourish, average workers don't. Record unemployment and joblessness leaves a massive chunk of the population without the money to support their basic needs, let alone spend it on entertainment. According to CBS News and Federal Data Collection Services, 17% of Americans in 2018 and 2019, even before an unprecedented global economic catastrophe, 17% of US adults were unable to pay all of their bills each month. Over 40% could not afford a surprise $400 expense, and a quarter of Americans were skipping necessary medical bills because they could not afford the cost. Now, obviously, this insinuates broader structural issues in this country. That I won't deny, but that's also not the topic for today. With a record economy in 2019, there was still a huge section of the population who could not afford recreational spending. And then, during a global economic disaster, when unemployment rises higher in the span of months than it did during years of the Great Depression, video game companies, who are doing better and making more money than ever before, are like, yeah, nah, bro. Now is the right time to hike the price to $70 instead of $60. We have more than ever. You, on average, have less than ever. But nah, bro, we're going to raise the price on you. Now, ignoring the fact that there are some exceptions here, for instance, certain areas and certain occupations, we're seeing unemployment expansion benefits that dwarfed their original paycheck, which helped contribute to these extreme numbers and would also provide some workers, a few, with recreational spending potential that they didn't have before. But working under the idea of averages, with so many industries suffering and so many workers temporarily or permanently losing their jobs with differing levels of unemployment assistance, the issue of timing becomes extremely relevant. But it gets worse because a $60 to $70 price hike for mainstream gaming in the United States will affect other countries even more. And these are countries that got hit by the same global economic turmoil as everyone else, sometimes even worse. The best example is probably Australia. Australians are paying roughly $130 under this model. Now, there are probably tricks that you can use or fiscally savvy methods of bringing that price down, but standard new releases under the model of a $70 US price point will enter the Australian market for $130 local and a little over $90, I believe, if converted to the US dollar. Another example, Europe, who will pay 80 euros for a game, roughly equivalent, I think, to 94 US dollars, which will price out a huge chunk of their population as certain euro-based countries have suffered an extremely harsh economic downturn under this pandemic. In addition, that is a downturn that is not ending yet and may persist for an untold amount of time into the future. The reason for this international pricing discrepancy is a complicated function of import costs and taxation and a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't honestly understand all that well. And to be fair, there are legitimate economic reasons for this, but the end user results are pretty much universally detrimental regardless. During a pandemic, with job losses all over the world and most industries suffering, the gaming companies, with record profit, record user adoption, and other benefits beyond my ability to even fully measure, such as a captive audience and a reduction in accessible time-competing alternative activities. But anyways, that's a whole different wormhole. The gaming companies raise the price so that a standard AAA game will now cost $10 extra in the United States and will cost nearly $100 in Australia and Europe. This ignores all the other countries. I've discussed before how Steam's regional pricing absolutely shits on certain regions around the globe. Some get huge discounts, but some get huge price hikes. And it's decided by, who else? The publishers, with an arbitrary format. It's not based on any quantifiable data. That really seems to hinge more on exploiting certain releases than abandoning the titles that are less mainstream, rather than finding a conversion ratio that does not price out certain countries. A price hike for mainstream AAA titles in the midst of a global pandemic that has locked down the economy in an unprecedented way and led more families than possibly ever to be unemployed and struggling is completely unjustified and unacceptable in the United States. Not just because of that, but because when you eliminate physical manufacturing, retail partner revenue cuts, and a whole bunch of other things along that supply chain, and transition to a proprietary first-party storefront, like most major publishers have already done, you increase your profit margin a substantial amount. But That price hike is even worse for other countries who receive these goods and services as an import. That's without even acknowledging special editions. Sometimes the special editions contain actual game-altering competitive advantages, which transform the product from something that a player can buy for a little bit extra and cool to something they feel they must buy to actually compete in terms of meta ability and speed. It might not even be true, and that's effectively their entire goal with these incentives anyway. FOMO, fear of missing out. They play on it like absolute predators. But when we realize that as the base price increases, the special edition price tag does as well, it starts to really resonate that this deliberate choice and its timing are really just disgusting. I understand that companies are driven by profit margins and revenue increases. That is especially true when discussing a publicly traded company, which almost every single major publisher either is or is owned by. But there is a difference between chasing those profits in a systematic way versus choosing, yes, choosing. They are in the midst of record high revenue and profit cycles on a monthly basis, which afford them the option of choosing to do this. There is a difference between chasing those profits and choosing now, of all the unholy times in recent memory, to raise that price. Sony is leading the pack here, along with Take-Two Interactive, but these are enormous companies with a lot of games and a lot of influence. What they say and what they do will impact the rest of the space and drag others in line with this new bracket. Take-Two has kind of retreated, I guess, from that rhetoric, now stating up to $70 and on a case-by-case basis after rightly receiving a lot of backlash, but it's hard to believe that this will be staved off for much longer. Ultimately, AAA games are moving to $70, something that will probably drive even more people into the arms of Microsoft and its Game Pass initiative, which added something like 5 million people in the span of just a few months and is now boasting unbelievable value. But regardless, AAA games are moving to $70. They are choosing this. They do not have to. They want this. They're doing it on purpose. There is a near unending list of reasons why they make more money now than ever before, merely on the back of digital distribution. But they choose this in the middle of an unprecedented, unpredictable, and devastating global economic crisis. Any company pursuing a $70 price tag, especially right now, are greedy, lying pieces of shit. Sony, Take-Two, as well as whoever follows. And I'm sorry to curse there, I normally don't, but that is just the immutable reality of jacking up the price of accessible entertainment while your business is higher than ever before, and half the planet suffers under global economic conditions. But that's it. If you want to support, links down below, merch, Odyssey, locals, and another gaming YouTuber to support as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.